Nice. So we can tell from the car park that as expected it is very, very busy. There's 11 other anglers on the lake, and not all of them will have night tickets, so some people will probably be going later on today. But yeah, it's very, very busy, and it's not a particularly big lake either. This was a swim that was very good to me in the winter, so not that that's got any significance now in July, but just walked in here first because it's the first. We're going to walk around and have a look in lots of different swims, but this was the first one we came to. So we can see the water is lovely and clear, loads of fresh, lush weed growth. The lily pads are up in a couple of places. The wind's really pumping in here. It looks really, really good actually. So just going to put down roots here for 5 minutes and have a look, and then we're going to start talking about what we're looking for. So watercraft is, as I've said before, it's not some dark art or Jedi skill. It's very simply using your eyes and your ears constantly. And the best practitioners of good watercraft will be using those skills to a very refined level. And it's certainly true that the more you practice them, the more you practice looking, then the better your eyes get. Just like working a muscle in the gym. It might sound strange, but the longer you spend looking and staring at a lake, the more apparent things will become to you. There's a carp, come right out of the water. So this is the second swim that we've walked into, and in the space of 3 minutes, let's say, there's been 3 occurrences. The first has been a very subtle swirl, 25 yards out past the band of weed. Very subtle swirl, it was definitely carp. Didn't make any noise, didn't displace much water. They're the shows that are much harder to see, you know. And for the untrained eye, unless you're looking right at that spot at that moment, you won't see it. To the more trained eye, if you're looking to the left or the right, you will see it, because your peripheral vision will pick it up instantly and you'll zone in on it, which is what just happened here. Closer from that, about 15 yards out in the weed in front of us, there was a very subtle little boil. It's what I call nervous water, where the water just moves in a sort of unnatural way that you know it can only be caused by the displacement of a fish, or displacement of the water by a fish. Those 2 signs, even one of those signs, is more than enough to make me want to put down roots and stare at the water in this area, because if you see a sign, you want to eliminate it from being random, and the only way to do that is having seen a sign or something of interest. Coloured water, could be anything. You're then going to put down roots and watch and watch and watch. We've been here 6 or 7 minutes now, and the 3rd sign was actually the sort of sign that 𝗖𝗿𝗄𝘀 would have spotted. A really big common, probably that sort of distance between his pectoral fins. He came up throat onto me, about 40 yards out to the right. So, you know, a good amount of this fish was probably 30 pounds, certainly an upper 20, and he came out the top third of his body and went down again. No sound, hardly a ripple, but a very significant show. So I'm going to stand here and watch for a good period of time, because this may well be the swim that we'll fish from. I spent some time staring at the water waiting for that confirmation show, but hasn't been forthcoming. But I'm certainly not ruling this area out. Having said that, I'm certainly not going to come in here without doing a proper lap of the lake either. So there's certainly some carp here. In the back of my mind is always, is there a mother load of carp somewhere else in one of the corners or something? So, and again, having not been here for so long, I want to do a lap anyway, just to re-familiarise myself. When the last time I was here was, as I said, sort of January, maybe February, early February. And obviously the fauna and everything else around the lake is so different now. It's just nice to see the weed and the place looking so nice. So we're going to do a lap. We've earmarked this as a potential spot. We may well come back to it shortly. So this swim's quite interesting because there is a load of really thick weed in close, extending out for maybe 10 yards or so. Now on club lakes, in fact on most lakes, you'll find that they're the areas that are left alone by anglers because anglers hate weed. Carp love weed. In fact, if there is one banker for location which holds true more than any other that I've found in my life, because location changes all the time, it's a constantly moving process because carp are wild animals, and carp will never be where you want them to be. They'll only be where they want to be. So you can read all the books and you can, watch all the videos and so on, but in autumn, say for example, I might get asked, now it's getting cold, should I fish the deep silty waters or should I start using this sort of bait, and I can never answer specifically because every lake is different. And whilst I can think of some lakes near me where, yeah, they might gravitate into the deeper water and the silty areas, I can think of another 3 where they tend to stay on the shallows for most of the winter or in reeds. So location is a constantly moving thing, and you can never apply a set of rules to location. But the nearest thing that I've found that is a constant is weed. Wherever the thickest weed is where the carp will be, summer or winter. And as I said, anglers are usually pretty terrified of weed and dealing with it and so on. And this swim is of interest at the moment. I haven't seen any fish, but right in front of here is a lot of weed. And I know it's on a nice deep shelf, not too far out, it terminates. So I'm thinking at the bottom of that shelf, the fish are probably patrolling along a clear edge, and with a bit of careful angling, it could be good. And it could be an area that the fish have just not seen any pressure for maybe quite a long period of time. I might be wrong on that, but that's my first instinct. The other thing is that the water here, this isn't such a good thing, in the edge is very clear. And the water further down where we were just looking, where we saw some fish, was tinged up. That's a massive sign, Coloured water is one of the big parts of watercraft. And as you're walking around the lake, always take that in, because you may find as you walk into a certain bay or any particular part, you'll notice that quite often it will change. And that might be the first sign you see, the first thing that makes you put roots down in an area based on something, and then you watch, and then the second domino will go over, then the third, and then the fourth. You'll see a sign, you'll see a bubble, something, but the reason you saw that fish, all those bubbles, is because you first noticed the tinge in the water and you thought, hang on, something's different here, I'm going to stop and have a look. So we're just taking things in, analysing them. The lake is giving us information all the time, and we've got to process it accordingly. We'll be discussing bird life and what a vital role they play in watercraft in depth later on, but just had an occurrence that I wanted to mention. It's not particularly warm today, but you could still have fish on or near the surface, especially on the back of the wind in an area like this. And a couple of ducks just swooped low over the water. Always, if you any birds flying over the lake, a pigeon just did it, swooped over the margin and came up to that tree. If you ever see that, always just watch their route and track them with your eyes, because you probably know what I'm about to say, but if there are fish on or near the surface, they will get spooked by birds passing over them. And there's been many a time where I've not known where the carp are at all, and then I've watched some geese or something fly over the middle of the lake way out, and there's an eruption out there as they pass over a group of carp and startle them. So it's just another little example of that pigeon's gone again, of the sort of signs that you're looking for. So I think we're going to carry on round the lake, watching and looking as we go, and see if we can put together more of this jigsaw. This is a tree that I found them in the past, and it looks to me like such an obvious tree to find them under, and yet the same brambles that I had to prune back with secateurs a couple of years ago are now fully grown, and I just got proper ragged getting in here. So for whatever reason people just don't bother with it. Yeah, I think it's a really good spot. The water is definitely coloured in this area. It's very carpy. You can see by the bottom that it's kind of scoured out in here. It's very lived in. And the area to the right of the snag as well, very lived in. I do like it in here, and carp are very house-proud creatures. Any area that they spend a lot of time in, they will scour the bottom down. They'll clean the floor, they'll hoover it, literally. And if you're ever walking along a lake that's full of trees all the way around, and it will look like, you know, carp love going underneath trees, but how do you find the right ones? Well, you find the right tree by looking in underneath them. And if you look in underneath a tree and it's all leafy and dark and silty, it's not lived in. Simple as that. If you look in one that has got a glowing bottom, sand, gravel, no leaves, they've been pushed away, then you can tell 100% in an instant that is a tree that the fish are using. It's a huge part of the jigsaw, really is. Massive edge knowing that. I remember a lake I fished back in 20 years ago now, back in Oxford, and it was tree lined all the way around, and there were so many big overhangs. Some of them came out 15-20 foot over the water, and you had no way of telling at first. I had no way of telling where the fish were going, what they were doing, and because there were so many trees I didn't know how to eliminate them. It was only by doing a lot of leg work and looking into the trees that I found that out of all of those trees, let's say there were 200, there was only one that the carp favoured, and that one tree was cratered out and polished off underneath, and it was on or around that tree that I ended up catching all of them. There was only 7 fish in the lake, not all of them, 5 of them. So yeah, just always bear that in mind. Check under trees. If you see it's polished, you know it's a place they've been living in. So we continued on our way round, and in all honesty, if we filmed every swim and every thought process within that swim, this video would be hours long, and we've got to be a bit more succinct than that. So we've done a lap, and the only fish that we saw, although we saw lots of nice looking spots and areas that appealed, we've ended up coming back to the spot where we actually saw carp flesh as I saw it. No two ways about it, you know, that's the surest sure way. And if you've got that to hang your hat on, then you're up and running. So we came back and sat down. I had a bit of a headache coming on, so I took a couple of pills. We sat down to have a look, and we actually saw 4 at once. Now, since then, and including just before we turned the camera on a second ago, I saw one about 35 pound come out. We've seen, I don't know, maybe 20 fish, and we haven't been back in this area very long. So the key thing there is that the very first place we suspected was the right area. Secondly, even on super pressured club lakes, you can get on fish. I so often hear that, oh, I can't get on the fish at Linear, or can't get a swim. Very rare do I ever go anywhere and not be able to get on fish somewhere. So even here, you know, on a busy day, 11 other anglers, we've managed to get on fish. The interesting thing is that, one of the interesting things that's gone through my mind is that more and more often, not so much here, but on hard lakes, I'm fishing one up in 𝗪𝗵𝘁𝗀 at the moment with only 40 carp in it. If the fish are not really showing and you're on it all day, from dawn till dusk, you're staring and staring and staring, and you only see one show, and that's it. When the fish do start showing eventually, that night or the next morning or whenever it may be, almost every time it's where you've seen that one show. So it's always worth bearing in mind. And in years gone by, I might not have moved just for one show, but if it's a low stocked, tricky lake, one show can be more than enough. So take note of that. We've got an awesome bit of weather. I'm gonna have a couple more pills because I've got a foggy head, but we're gonna get set up and have a look at how we're gonna approach the swim. There's a lot of fish out there, it looks good. Okay, so now we need to get ourselves in position. There's a lot of fish out there, a hell of a lot. So my plan is this. I'm going to flick out a light lead, a little tiny lead on the end of my spod rod, and I'm not going to cast on top of the fish. I'm going to cast just short of them, and I'm going to find the edge of where the weed is and where it's fishable. I don't want to go out too well. There's no need to go out too far because the fish are only 40 yards max and short. So I'm just going to try and locate a bit of smooth glide. Anywhere where the lead travels, where you've seen fish, is good enough for a bite. Doesn't matter if it's silt, sand, clay, gravel, mud. If the lead slides without resisting you, clip it up. Big heron just went over the spot. Clip it up and you can get a bite there. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so we're coming into evening time now, and the spot or the swim has proved to be extremely weedy and required a fair bit of leading around. So my usual approach for getting to grips with any kind of weed is always a stiff rod, spod rod, braid straight through, and a bare lead only. None of those. I see people on club lakes like this casting out marker floats and leads with all sorts of prongs and spikes coming off them, and you couldn't design anything better to catch and jam in weed. It must be soul destroying for people trying to find spots with that sort of contraption. So a small lead, streamlined, tapered lead that's just big enough to get to the spot. I'm using 2 ounces here actually, but so it took a fair bit of casting up and down the skyline, just trying to find something, and it was actually harder than I thought it was going to be. But I haven't fished here in the summer, and I didn't know that the weed extended as thickly as it has. But anyway, there's always something out there. The fish were in the area big time. So one thing that I always never worry about is, although less is always better than more, I'm never too worried about casting around when there's plenty of weed, because it's almost like the fish are insulated from a disturbance. They might melt away into the weed for a little while and stop showing, but they always come back out. They never go far. The more weed there is, the more disturbance you can get away with, although obviously less is better than more. But to that end, I will never inhibit myself to find a good spot by worrying, oh, I'm casting too much. If it's really weedy, you've got to find something decent to fish on. So I found a really nice spot, and not very far out, which is really good. Just literally on the fringe of the weed. It drops down into, seems to be a bit of a crater or something. Certainly as I cast around to the left-hand edge of it, it was a second or two shallower on the drop of the lead, and then it dropped down a little bit longer and then donk into the hole. So a really nice feeling spot. It's where I've seen a lot of activity. Put both rods there probably about 4 or 5 feet apart, and then I've spombed some bait over the top. You can't use a cat when you're fishing accurately to holes in the weed. The only way to do it is with a spom or a spod. So I've knocked up a mix, crushed up some 𝗪𝗿𝗀𝘀𝘆 and broken them into tiny pieces. It's a paste covered one, it's a new one, krill active, so it's really nice and sticky, full of attractors. So I've crushed all that up. I've added some Calanus liquid, and then I've mixed in some pure krill powder, some 2.3mm bloodworm pellets, and quite a lot of 𝗪𝗵𝘁𝗵. So big ups to 𝗪𝗵𝘁𝗵 Particles, that's where I get my gear from up there. They do a great job. 𝗪𝗵𝘁𝗵's very, very underused particle. I've used them a lot down the years. Remember, I used to use them on the blue pool and they were absolutely devastating. Lovely, perfectly round, darkly coloured little particle, and carp really love them. And the main reason I like them is because no one really uses them. So lots of maples mixed in. And then the rig itself, just tiny little hook baits. And one thing I do find as I travel around carp fishing different venues, either through work fishing or through my own fishing, my own campaigns, I would say almost without exception, in fact without exception, smaller hook baits get more bites than bigger hook baits. There have been times where I've been fishing 20mm boilies and I fished a 20 on the hook, you know, and that can work well in the right situation. But generally speaking, certainly if you're fishing over a mix, then a small hook bait is what you want. So I've got tiny little pieces of krill boilie whittled right down, short sharp rigs, drop off lead system, and now we're just waiting for a bite. The fish have been in the area all around, and I kind of almost feel like I should have had a bite already, but that's stupid. The rods have only been out an hour or two, but they have been in and around the area already, which proves again, when you're getting yourself sorted in thick weed, you can get away with quite a bit of disturbance. And so yeah, it's all to play for. The sun is starting to set, and we'll see what the carp gods bring to us. Well, good morning. We've completed one night, so we've had rods out now for about 14 hours or so, I suppose. We got fishing late yesterday afternoon, and not the earliest of starters this morning because I had insomnia all night, didn't get to sleep till about 6, so I'm a bit woolly-headed this morning. But all I can tell you is that I'm failing so far miserably to extract a carp. Seen a couple more in the area. Quite surprised, you know, I thought something would happen in the night. That's probably why I couldn't get to sleep, because I was expecting a bite at any time. So I think sometimes you have to take accountability, you know. Quite often if you haven't caught a fish, then it's down to you. Notwithstanding the fact that it is a tricky club lake that gets a lot of pressure, still feel that doing a blank night on here probably isn't acceptable. Maybe I'm too hard on myself. So I'll be having a good think about what I've done and whether I have put a foot wrong today. I've seen fizzing on the spot actually in the last half hour, so maybe I am being too harsh. It could go at any moment. Maybe they just don't feed at night, and during the evening phase they did push across us a bit more to the right, but there were still fish near the area, so I didn't feel I needed to move. So today is going to be assessing mentally, trying to process what's happened during the night and what I've done to see if there are any chinks in the armour, in my armour, that I've got wrong. Looking for chinks in the armour of the carp, of course. And what I am going to do is prime up a couple of margin spots. So there's a couple of little zones I know they do like to get into during the day, so I'll be going to put a bit of bait on those very shortly actually. And that might be our fallback position that will save the day, hopefully. But yeah, I want to give you an update in a little while. When I get my words right, I'm all like, whoa. In the meantime, another strong coffee. I'll get myself together, and we'll crack one. We will crack one. Come on. Perseverance has paid off with allowing us to hook one. We've just got to hope he comes in now. Incredibly cagey bites, remind me of floating crust back in the 80s really, where your crust would go really soggy, and sometimes they would suck the hook through the crust and the bread would still be there floating on the surface, and then you'd find yourself attached to a carp. And 2 bites this afternoon have really, the floater has literally vaporised. No vortex, no swirl, nothing. And that was what the bite was. And after the first occurrence, I thought it's not happening again. Struck, and we're into one. He's weeded himself up, so I'm just going to keep the pressure on and just see what he does. Sometimes you just have to keep the pressure on them and hope they get bored before you do. Just keep compression in the rod and just wait, and hopefully they kick out. But I have to say that is a tactic I've found that works really, really well in Canadian, thick Canadian weed, whereas this is some sort of algae mixed with blanket weed, mixed with Canadian and even another type of weed. So the only thing in our favour is the water's quite shallow, so he can't bore down really, really deep. I suspect it's quite a good fish. And I really, really want to get it in because the bite was just incredible. Well, there wasn't a bite. There was no bite. It literally vaporised the floater. Just the same thing happened 20 minutes before. And I went to Luke, did you see that? It just literally disappeared. And the second time it happened, I thought, well, I'm having that, and I struck, and big eruption on the surface. His mates are still taking. Just come on, slow down. No. Ah. Well, what was already a grueler of a session has just given me a swift kick in the kahunas. Carp gods are not liking me today. All we got back is a weedy old bubble float Most of the hook link seems to have gone right by the hook. There's a big fish, that. Certainly a mid-20. Still, the fish are taking. I'm going to put on a stronger hook link, see if we can get them going again. So as I mentioned right at the top of this, that Watercraft it's the most essential tool for the carp angler, and it's not black magic. It's something that anyone can do, but a lot of people probably don't do because A, they may not know quite what to look for, perhaps if they're new to the game, or B, they can't be asked because it takes effort, it takes a lot of effort. Good watercraft comes about through effort and persistence. So before we get into the actual application of the effort and what you need to be doing in terms of levels of intensity, which is a big part of it, let's just look at some elements of watercraft which are key cornerstones to the building that we're going to construct on top of it, the bedrock of it, if you like. So first of all, we're very fortunate that we fish for carp because carp are very showy creatures. You know, they will, whatever the time of year, whatever the time of day, whatever the conditions, they've got potential to show you exactly where they are. And then that is why you should never switch off, because even when it seems the most unlikely of times, you might see that one show that can turn your season around. Now, can you imagine if, we'd have to be a bit mental, I think, a bit crazy, but can you imagine if we fished for eels? A fish that was totally invisible and you just had you had nothing to go on other than, I mean, you would spend a lifetime of carp fishing, you know, probably for very little result. But as I said, we're very lucky. Carp do like to flaunt themselves at certain times. To that end, if you can, always start your carp sessions as early in the morning as you possibly can. Not only start them, but if you can, make the effort to be up early in the mornings. Now, if I could go back in time and give one bit of advice to my younger, lazier self, it would definitely be that, because I used to be so, well, like everyone, you get tired from work and I'm not a natural early bird anyway. So getting up at first light, particularly at this time of year when it's between 4 and 5 a.m. didn't happen really. But now, you know, if I'm on a real serious session, by that I mean campaign fishing, all my fishing is serious to me and important to me, but being up early in the morning is absolutely fundamental, and I soon learnt that, you know, if I'd been working all week, then I would get up early on, you know, my sessions would always be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, go home Sunday lunchtime. And so I would do the dawn patrol on Saturday morning, and then Sunday I would treat myself to a lion, because, you know, going home like a zombie to the missus isn't always the best thing to do. So, you know, if you're not blessed with being a natural early bird like me, try and turn it around, make the effort. You will see more at first light on most carp lakes than you will any other time of the day. The lower the stock and the weedier the lake, sometimes that might be your only opportunity to see a fish. And this is all part of watercraft, because it will enable you to get yourself in the right position. And that's why I say, if you can, always arrive at the lake as early in the morning as you can, because it will give you a chance to get where the fish are. Very often they're in that area and they will come back to it. So, so as you probably realise, watercraft is again, it's all about looking. And a few years ago I came to realise that virtually every single carp that went in my landing net, if I traced back the sequence of events, the tipping point was always something I'd seen. Never caught fish out of the blue or fishing blind, because I rarely did it anyway, but and that was a real eureka moment. I thought, wow, every fish that I'm lucky enough to catch is based on the domino effect from seeing something. So once I realised that, I started looking even harder and harder, and my catch rate went up. Your eyes are first, second and third your most important weapons as a carp angler. And these days, people's eyes are used less and less and less. And if you're looking for an edge and you're angling in this super competitive, you know, some lakes, you know, it's really, you know, club lakes, day tickets, you know, if you're up against it with other anglers, one of the ways that you can set yourself apart from them is by being glued to the water. If I think of all the most successful anglers that I've been lucky enough to fish with, some really well known, some not well known, some completely off the radar, the one common denominator that they all have is they're all obsessive watchers of the water. And I've never ever met one angler in my life who catches more than his fair share who isn't compulsively looking at the water all the time. Now think about that. That's hard work. And in this day of social media, so many people are in their bivvy on Facebook or doing whatever they're doing, and the hours spent watching the lake are very, very few indeed. So before we get back, I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but there are a lot of different signs that the lake will be making available to you, which will help you find a carp. Now, one of the best clues to carp location, or the best signalers of the presence of carp, is a coot. Coots are absolute. I've caught so many carp because of coots. I know they're annoying sometimes, you know, we all tear our hair out, you can see I have, when they're diving on the spot, but they can really be an asset. And they, like I say, so the thing with coots is if they are startled by a carp, they will give a particular type of alarm call. It's not a territorial noise, it's a two-note warble. It's a fear, alarm of fear. I've got a couple of recordings on my phone, might see if we can get one on this program for you. But if I ever hear that and I don't know where the carp are, even if I think I know where the carp are, I will investigate. That shrill two-note warble from a coot, that means there's carp that have disturbed that coot, 100%. I've found carp on big waters and small just through that. And then you go around, you watch the coots, you'll see them moving around nervously, you'll see them extending their necks, looking all around them, sometimes reversing out of an area. How many times have you seen a coot up against the island margin or in the edge of the lake and it starts stamping its feet? Carp have come by, right close, usually where they've got a nest. Massive indicator of the presence of carp. But again, that noise that they make, that is an absolute nailed on indicator. If you've got swans with cygnets on your lake, another absolute banker is swans super protective with their cygnets. And if you're just watching the lake and you see the swans going across and you see the parents start jabbing their beaks into the water, carp, 100%. Even though the carp aren't a threat to the cygnets, the adult swans will do that. So if you see them doing that, anything unusual like that, sometimes you'll see the swans going through a weed bed and suddenly they'll boil up, and not the carp, but the swans will get flustered because their feet have touched something that's moved. And you know, what I'm trying to get across is that the lake will be giving you signs all the time, but you will only see those if your eyes are out there and not on social media or whatever, fast asleep in your bivvy. There's a lot of wood pigeons around this lake. And I mentioned before, I wish we'd filmed it, but about half an hour ago they swooped over a little dot island out to my right, and as they swooped, probably erupted about 8 carp. I didn't know they were there, just sat in the weed. 8 different eruptions, all boiled up just by this. So again, low flying birds, swans, coots, tufties. We've all seen coots and tufties come out of the water like a 𝗖𝗿𝗽 missile where they've been foraging around, they come face to face with a big fish. Anything that's unusual. What are you doing, you crazy wood pigeons? And fizzing is another good one, of course. Carp, when they're feeding, will make bubbles. Working out what's gas and what is carp can sometimes be tricky, but if they are small clusters of bubbles and they're moving, clearly a fish. And usually I found that gas bubbles will be of same sort of uniform size. They come up in a straight stream and they burst as soon as they hit the surface after forming for a very short space of time a circle. That's typical gas, so don't be chasing those. But any other type of fizzing, obviously flat, when it's flat calm, you can see it, and you can locate carp just by it. There's been many times where I've just found areas of fizzing, I've zoned in on it and I've stood and stared, and I've known that if I stare at the fizzing long enough, at some point a carp will breach to clear the silt out of his gills and you'll see one. And sometimes, you know, that like you might find one little sign in a swim which might be one little patch of fizz. Sometimes it might be a big patch of fizz which is called sheeting, where a fish is flanked along the bottom. See that quite a lot, and you'll stand there and you'll watch and you'll watch and you'll wait, and eventually a carp will show. I remember finding some fish at 𝗖𝗿𝗽 on the North Lake once, just walking around. There was an island at one end, in a place called 𝗪𝗿☍, I think it was called. But anyway, I just stood there, and in the margins of the island were just these tiny little bits of what I call nervous water, just displacement. I call them blooms. They're like if you put your hands in the bath and you just went like that bloom you get on the surface. And could just see that every now and again on the corners of the island. So subtle, silent. And I'd gone round there in the first place because a coot had been drumming its feet against there. It was the first giveaway. I walked round, see the blooms. That's the second giveaway. Get up a tree, eyes in the sky, absolutely deadly if you can do it safely. Got up the tree, 2 or 3 big fish going around the island, and that night I fished that area and caught a couple of big ones. Why did I catch them? Trace it back. I noticed the coot stomping its feet. I went round, and then it's a domino effect of clues. So anyway, I could go on about this for an inordinate amount of time because it is my most passionate part of carp fishing, but there's enough really anecdotal evidence that any of us could fill a book with. But the bottom line is that you have to make it your #1 priority to be able to receive any signs or signals that the lake is going to give you. And the only way that you can do that is by burning what I call optical calories. And you might laugh, but just to summarise, optical calories are the way that I measure the intensity of looking. So a lot of people have said to me over the years things like, oh, it's all right for you to say, move on to where the carp are showing or something, but on my lake they never show. And I've heard it so many times you'd think they never show on any lake around the country. So I thought, well, I've got to find a way of explaining to people how hard you have to look. So I came up with this. So if you stare at the lake, concentrating all day, you're shattered, you get knackered. It's like if you drove to Scotland, by the time you get there you're tired because you've been using your eyes and you're concentrating. It's a tiring, draining process. So I therefore reason that if you're debilitated or tired at the end of the process, then you're burning something. So let's call it energy, let's call it eye energy, optical calories. So for every 1 hour that you stare at a lake, you're going to burn 100 optical calories. Over the course of a day, I mean at this time of year it's light at 5 and it's dark at 10. How many hours is that? I have to ask the stunt man behind the camera, how many hours is that? 5 till 10 at night, so that's 17 hours I think, 17 hours. Maths wasn't my strong point. So let's take someone like 𝗪𝗿𝗀, Dave Lane, could use other anglers but you wouldn't have heard of them, so it's pretty pointless. So those anglers of that calibre at this time of year will be burning around 1,700 calories in a day, probably in excess of that. And if you think about that in stark relief and compare that to maybe yourself, if you're being honest, perhaps, you know, a lot of people, they might have a little look while they make a cup of tea, they'll go on Facebook, they'll go and talk to John Two Swims down about the football. How many hours in a day do you actually spend looking? Let's say for a lot of people, I reckon there'd be around 200. Now that's 2 hours of unbroken concentration on the lake. That's a lot. But even if you put yourself at 200 and Dave Lane's at 1,700 for the same period of time, and I promise you the key to successful carp fishing is what you see. Dave Lane's there and you're there. It's a gulf, it's an absolute gulf, and this is one of the absolute key factors that separates anglers and their results. So I hope you've been able to take a little bit from that. Strive, practice. As I said, the more you look, the more you see, because the stronger your eyes get. Get in the habit, I promise you, you'll catch more carp. Well, that was a day and a half. Thank you, Carp God, for kicking the bollocks out of me. So after a night of complete and utter insomnia and no carp, bearing in mind that I came here because I thought it was the sort of place that could do a carp. I've been properly proven wrong so far, but the day's been an interesting one. It's been very full on. We've done some stalking and got some fish coming in close under a little tree over there in Peg 21, and they were coming in there, and that looked good for a while. It was very, very, very hard to see what was going on, and gave it in there an hour and a half, maybe a bit more, but nothing materialised. Then we found them on the surface, got them going on floaters against the odds, against the seagulls, against the mallards, and eventually, with a bit of persistence, we managed to get them taken and feeding. Got a rig in, and again, after a bit more persistence, nice black one just came out on the left-hand edge of my spot. After a bit more persistence, we managed to hook one, and it was a good one as well. The bite was incredible because it was a bite that didn't exist. The floater literally, well, it didn't literally vaporise, but it did disappear before our very eyes. 1 minute it was there, then nothing. There was no swirl. There was literally nothing. And it had already happened once before, as I said, and this time it happened and I struck and I was in. Big fish, big chestnut tail came out, and a war of attrition in the weed bed for the next 10 minutes or so, which left the carp victorious and me beaten again. So we managed to hook one. Hate losing them, obviously. I believe it's the only fish that's been hooked. The lake is fishing terrible. We've spoken to quite a few people. No one's caught anything. We've not seen anything caught. And I think that's what you get late summer on a lot of lakes. They've seen pressure, they've seen bait, they've seen everything's been going on for months. And you know, these are smart fish and they're very good at not getting caught. So we're up against it. We've got one more night, our second night tonight. I've changed things slightly. I've got one rod on the main spot. Two fish have just rolled very close to it actually whilst I've been talking to you guys. So that looks good. And I baited it this morning after I wound in so that I could leave it all day. Although I don't think any fish have fed on it during the day because they've all been in a weed bed sunning themselves. But there's a gully very, very close in here which is very weedy, and I found a tiny little clear spot in it. Just an underarm cast. So I've fished one rod now on its own over a little bit of bait close in about 3 foot of water. This morning when I got up, I looked and this gully was coloured, and I think that they maybe come through here in the night. You know, it's very, very weedy and shallow, but probably doesn't get fish much because it's so close and it's so dirty. But I found a nice spot. So 2 rods, not very carpy, one tip up and out there and one tip down and in close, but who cares what we look like? We just want to catch a carp. So we'll see. We've still got another 24 hours to play with, so I shouldn't be beating myself up too much. We've only been here for 24 hours so far. It's testing, but it's fun, and it's going to make that carp, if I catch one, even more precious. So let's see what happens. carp. Really pleased after a day that was very, very hard and draining and demanding. Finally got a reward on the main baited area. Felt something wasn't quite right with the presentation and the hook bait, so I changed just as it was getting dark, and after a very short while in position, this guy tore off with it. Long battle in a weed, horrendous battle in a weed, but we prevailed and we got a carp. Fantastic. So we'll be talking a bit more about rigs in an upcoming episode, and I'll talk about the changes that I make in these sort of situations and what's paid off. But for now, I can get into the sleeping bag smelling of carp with a big smile on my face. Well, that was very unexpected. One of the biggest fish in the lake, 3710, absolute beast of a chocolate, incredible looking common. I mean, my God, they don't come much better than that, do they? That came to the close in rod, a mere 3 wraps, lightly baited, bit of chopped krill, a few maple peas, and it just went off a very short while ago, just as the sun was coming over the tree. So it's capped off a frustrating but ultimately very memorable session. And Watercraft, again, you know, I only put the rig there because I saw a fish travelling through on that spot. So again, trace the capture back. It should always be the catalyst, something you've seen, and again this was. So always look, always react, and you'll catch more carp. We're going to do a bit of floater fishing later if it gets really hot, which it's supposed to. But if we don't do any good, which we probably won't, then this is the last time you'll see us. So thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you very much, Mr. Common. Well, back to lick my wounds. That was pretty sensational and epic. Brilliant bite, and been thwarted. That fish was, I was actually got it moving at one point with my toes. He was buried into the weed in front of me, and he wouldn't move. And when I was hand lining it, so I just nudged him with my toes, and he sort of kicked up and came up, and there was so much weed there, and I've tried to net the whole lot. It was the only choice I had really, and no fault of the net at all, but I've snapped it in half on one of the arms because there was about 50 pound of weed, probably 22 pound of black common carp, and a lot of strain and pressure. So I almost got it in, and thwarted by the extreme nature of the situation, but hook pulled in the end. So that's carp fishing, highs and lows.